that DEI really just has no place in accrediting an institution. It's not necessarily relevant to the quality of the education you receive. In there. So I don't see why you should need to have it. So this piece crossed my radar earlier this week, or this past week rather, from Free the Inquiry, which is a great Substack. If you're not following it, I highly recommend reading it if you're interested in university-related stuff in higher education. And again, why do I talk about higher education? Because it's where we train the next generation of scientists for the most part. So that particular aspect isn't here. And this headline caught my attention from Free the Inquiry. Major accreditor reconsiders DEI requirements. Letters to universities show how the requirements have been implemented. So, for those of you who don't know, there's aside from just all the internal stuff of the universities, there's university accreditation, which any new university has to deal with. And just to give you a sense, this is from the Department of Education website. For those of you who are not familiar with what accreditation is and why it's there. The goal of accreditation is to ensure that institutions of higher education meet acceptable levels of quality. Now, obviously, reasonable people can disagree as to whether or not higher education is meeting those things. I'm not going to get into that right now. Accreditation in the United States involves non-governmental entities, accrediting organizations, as well as federal and state government agencies. These three entities are formally known as the Triad. Accreditation's quality assurance function is one of three main elements of oversight governing the Higher Education Act's HEA, Federal Student Aid Program. In order for students to receive federal student aid from the U.S. Department of Education for post-secondary study, universities, colleges, what have you, the institution must be accredited by a nationally recognized, in quotes there, accrediting agency. Role of accrediting agencies. Accrediting agencies, which are private educational associations that develop evaluation criteria and conduct peer evaluations to assess whether or not those criteria are met. Institutions and/or programs that request an accreditor's evaluation and that meet accreditors' criteria are then accredited. Role of the Department of Education. Under the HEA, the department recognizes, approves accrediting agencies that Secretary of Education determines to be reliable authorities as to the quality of education or training provided by institutions of higher education, and the department publishes a list of nationally recognized accrediting agencies. The department also recognizes state agencies for the approval of vocational educational institutions authorized by the state in which the institution is located, and that receive approval through the Secretary's recognition process. Recognition of a state approval agency for vocational education allows students to receive federal student aid from the department. That's a typo right there on the Department of Education's website. The department also publishes a list of nationally recognized state approval agencies. The department also recognizes state agencies for the approval of nursing education authorized by the state which the program is by the state in which, again, another typo, the program is located to approve nursing programs for non-HEA purposes and that receive approval through the Secretary's recognition process. The department also publishes a list of nationally recognized state agencies for the approval of nursing education. The department does not accredit individual educational institutions and/or programs and is not directly involved in the institutional or programmatic accrediting process. The department recognizes only agencies that apply for recognition, many do not. Along with its recognition decision, the department designates the scope of accrediting activities to which its recognition pertains. So there's a bunch of other things here with that, in which accrediting agencies are recognized, but that's the main thing. And I wanted to point out the other aspect here, which is the functions of accreditation or what that's supposed to do. Accreditation in the United States. The United States has no federal Ministry of Education or other centralized authority exercising single national control over post-secondary institutions in this country. This is just a point to say things because in other countries that is the case where they have a centralized authority that exercises national control over those different universities and colleges and what have you. So that's just to make a point that the U.S. is different The states assume varying degrees of control over education, but in general, institutions of higher education are permitted to operate with considerable independence and autonomy. As a consequence, American educational institutions can vary widely in the character and quality of their programs. In order to ensure a basic level of quality, ensure, I wonder if that's right. But anyway, the practice of accreditation arose in the United States as a means of conducting non governmental peer evaluation of educational institutions and programs. Private educational associations of regular or of regional, or national scope have adopted criteria reflecting the qualities of sound educational programs. Reflecting the qualities of a sound educational program, I read that wrong, and have developed procedures for evaluating institutions or programs to determine whether or not they are operating at basic levels of quality. Some functions of accreditation: verifying that an institution or program meets established standards, assisting prospective students in identifying acceptable institutions, assisting institutions in determining the acceptability of transfer credits, helping to identify institutions and programs for the investment of public and private funds, protecting an institution against harmful internal and external pressure, creating goals. This is particularly relevant in certain, with lots of things that go on with universities. Creating goals for self-improvement of weaker programs and stimulating a general raising of standards among educational institutions. Involving faculty and staff comprehensively in institutional evaluation and planning. Establishing criteria for professional certification and licensure, and for upgrading courses offering such preparation, and providing one of several considerations used as a basis for determining eligibility for federal assistance. So, standards with that obviously are in here, so I'm not going to go too far into that. That's not the point. That's not the point to me to describe in full depth the whole accreditation process or anything like that for a university. More so to just give a background for this, coming from Free the Inquiry. Because it is one thing that has happened, too, aside from universities, that some of the accreditors have incorporated DEI or diversity, equity, inclusion requirements, and so some of them are now reconsidering that. And this is a major one in particular. A win for open inquiry has appeared amidst relentless uncertainty in higher education. The Western Association of Senior College and University Commission, the WSCUC, that's an side tangent. There are acronyms that are easy that you can repronounce as a word, and then there are acronyms that you can't. I have no idea how you would repronounce that as a word, that WSCUC. Anyway, continue. The accreditor of most universities in California and Hawaii is reconsidering the diversity, equity, inclusion, DEI requirements for accreditation in light of the Trump administration's executive order on accreditation. Yes, there was an executive order on that. I'm not going to go into that right now, but it is linked off of this one, and as always, this will be included in the references of the video. So, among other things, the executive order, the legality of which has not yet been established, court cases are right, bans accreditors from requiring universities to adhere to DEI standards as part of the accreditation and reaccreditation process. Though the total banning of all things DEI represents another political intrusion on academic freedom, dropping DEI as an accreditation requirement allows more space for freedom of thought in higher education, as institutions are no longer bound to a particular partisan orthodoxy. Departure from DEI requirements would be a significant change for the WSCUC, though obviously carried out under duress. Their 2023 standards of accreditation, which all universities seeking WSCUC accreditation must adhere to, elevate DEI as a core tenet. Each of the four overarching WSCUC 2023 standards begins with a preamble requiring that a university seeking accreditation or reaccreditation, quote, makes explicit its commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. I got problems with that because that's shouldn't have forcing from the government, but you shouldn't be forcing ideological orthodoxies from an accreditor either. And expects that institutional purposes be imbued with commitments to DEI. WSCUC itself has integrated equity and inclusion into its own organizational strategic goals and objectives, and presently maintains an Equity and Inclusion Council. A review of available materials by HXA's research team shows WSCUC has reprimanded universities found to be insufficient in their zeal for DEI and instructed them to address WSCUC concerns that are typically later reviewed in a follow-up visit. For example, in 2018, WSCUC suggested that San Jose State University, quote, deepen the effort to recruit, hire, and retain faculty who reflect the diversity of the SJSU student community. SJSU's records indicate that the share of white faculty decreased rather considerably after that, from 55% in 2018 to 37% in 2025. Similarly, in 2020, California State Fullerton received word that it should, quote, continue to focus on faculty diversity with special attention to units that have made less progress than others. Since fall of 2020, the share of white faculty at Cal State Fullerton decreased somewhat from 58% to 51%. It is impossible to say exactly what influence WSCUC had on hiring decisions, given other potential external and internal demands on university hiring, particularly following the unrest of 2020. But it cannot be ruled out that among the myriad of factors influencing faculty hiring, WSCUC expectations ranked among them. In 2021, WSCUC recommended to California Lutheran University that they strengthen, quote, resources dedicated to recruiting, supporting, mentoring, advising, and retaining faculty of color, end quote, and begin to, quote, measure the execution of a diversity-enhanced curriculum, end quote. Shortly thereafter, California Lutheran hired their first chief diversity officer, and the student's newspaper story on the hire referenced the accreditor. In a follow-up visit, WSCUC praised California Lutheran for their DEI efforts. And last year, Azusa Pacific University was told to, quote, implement the university's diversity, equity, and inclusion strategic plan, end quote. Although the university's student body was 74% non-white, suggesting that it was already a vibrant and welcoming community to historically underrepresented populations. WSCUC recommendations don't always result in real-world actions. In 2018, Humboldt State University was told to, quote, prioritize diversification of faculty and staff demographics to align with the diversity of the student body. But records indicate that the share of non-white faculty has not changed significantly since then. Adherence to DEI standards can result in positive recognition by an accrediting body. For example, in the same letter to SJSU as cited above, WSCUC praised the institution for its newly established Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. Whittier College was commended for strong commitment to DEI, quote, as evidenced by restorative justice conversations, end quote. As this sampling of many cases illustrates, far from being mere rubber stampers, accrediting agencies and their policies wield tremendous influence over the world of higher education. The bureaucratic tedium of accreditation belies the power of any accreditor to influence university policy for enormous numbers of institutions, faculty, and students. Students and faculty is what that actually says. I reversed it. The Californian and Hawaiian universities under WSCUC's specific purview host over 12% of the university students in the United States and are homes to thousands of faculty. Academic homes for thousands of faculty, By pumping the brakes on the DEI policy, WSCUC is loosening the grip that DEI orthodoxy, especially in regards to hiring practices, has on WSCUC accredited institutions. Although WSCUC has only paused enforcement of their DEI-related standards while these standards are reviewed, an abandonment of the DEI requirements for accreditation seems inevitable given the actions of the Trump administration. This welcome potential depoliticization of accreditation would hopefully be considered by other major institutional accrediting bodies. It's worth noting that of the major accreditors, WSCUC and its community college equivalent organization, the Accrediting Commission for Community and Junior Colleges, have demonstrated a particular fervor for DEI. For example, ACCJC's, that's another one where you just can't turn the acronym into a word, Policy on Social Justice boasts that ACCJC's, quote, current commitment to promote equity, diversity, and foster inclusionary practices is rooted in the understanding of historical and systemic institutional racist structures and policies that exist in society stemming from prejudice, discrimination, and implicit biases which have benefited white people and disadvantaged people of color, end quote. A lot of postmodern gobbledygook in there. And it may be turtles all the way up and down, given that the Council for Higher Education Accreditation, which essentially accredits the accreditors, And overseas, the WSCUC, quote, affirms that diversity, equity, and inclusion are inextricably connected to quality assurance in higher education, quote, end quote. Still, if WSCUC's change of course is any indication, there is reason to hope that other accrediting bodies will follow suit and realign themselves with their missions to promote quality education rather than restrictive, politicized dogmas. And this is just a point to say in there that DEI really just has no place in accrediting an institution. It's not necessarily relevant to the quality of the education you receive in there. So I don't see why you should need to have it. And it would be great to see it stop because much like the government should not have much say in just as much as the government should not be pushing DEI related stuff, or let's put it another way, it shouldn't be pushing any particular political orthodoxy onto university. Neither should the accreditor. It should be about the quality of the education. And I have yet to see a whole lot of proof that a DEI requirement really improves the quality of an education that you receive at a college. That would be a great science question. I would love to see somebody in social sciences answer that. But let me know what you think. Hit the like button on the way out the door. Comment the video, share the video, subscribe to the channel, all that lovely good jazz. Until next time, I'm Adrian. Stay curious.